Hello, my dear viewers. This amazing story will be very instructive for you. It is very interesting and beautiful. I wish you enjoy watching it. Valerie looked out of the cab window at the cityscapes passing by her eyes and smiled. She was returning home from the airport. Her business trip had been unexpectedly rescheduled. The chief had called her boss, with whom Valerie was getting ready to go through passport control, and told her there was no need to fly anywhere today. "All right, go home," and ordered the chief accountant of their company. "Rest today, wait in the office tomorrow." Valerie couldn't believe her unexpected good fortune. A whole free day. And George was just home, taking a week's vacation, and daughter Kate was flying to Adler with her parents. She and her husband will finally get some time alone. They need it so much. Lately, both of them have been starved of time for each other. And before it was different, the compliments, admiring glances, walks, romantic gestures, surprises without a reason, and talk about everything in the world. When did things change? With the birth of her daughter, or when Valerie went to work after a prolonged maternity leave. The woman could not remember the exact moment when George began to drift away. It seemed to have lasted 3 years. Valerie missed her husband's jokes, attention, and care. She sincerely missed her formerly in love husband, whose mere glance made the woman feel loved and attracted. Of course, Valerie understood everything. George has a serious job. He often has to fly on business trips to Novosibirsk, where the company opened a large branch office 4 years ago. He practically lives there, sometimes staying there for weeks at a time, getting tired. It is clear that he has no time for romance. No, George honestly fulfilled all the duties of a husband and father, provided their family with everything they needed, spent his free time with his daughter, never strayed from the household chores. And yet Valerie knew that it was time to change something. She wanted her old warmth back. And this free day to spend alone with her husband was just right. It was good for their relationship, as if the fate itself helped them. Valerie quietly opened the door with her key. She wanted to make a surprise effect, to see her husband's surprised and delighted face. She tiptoed into the hallway. From their bedroom came George's quiet voice. He was on the phone, probably calling from work again. He often received calls and messages, even at night. And on weekends or holidays, he could easily be summoned to the office or the site. What could he do? An important person in a large construction company, but the salary was appropriate. Valerie was not one of those wives who throw tantrums, busy husbands, demanding attention. She understood. Husband tries for the sake of their family. Even pitied him and was grateful to him for this work, proud of such a busy and irreplaceable husband. And now a woman did not interfere with George, hiding at the front door, and decided to let him finish talking and then discover his arrival. Except that her husband's tone was strange, obviously not businesslike. Valerie involuntarily listened to the words, "Sweetheart, but I'll make a deal. Give you a few days off, come. Why pass up such a chance? Do not worry, everything will be resolved. I'll buy you the tickets, of course. But when else will my wife go on a business trip for a week? She rarely goes on business trips. And then there's my daughter at sea. Lana, well, you wanted to see the capital. I'll give you such an excursion." Valerie could not believe her ears. Is this really happening to her? Her husband is now cooing with some lady, and even calling her out to them while her wife is on a business trip. George has a mistress. Valerie really wanted to explain the overheard conversation to herself in a different way, but her imagination was clearly lacking for a different version. And what else to justify all this? "Honey, come over, my wife's away on business." George, on the other hand, spoke softly and affectionately into the phone. It had been a long time since he had spoken to his wife like that. Apparently, the stranger Lana had decided to come to Moscow after all. That's fine. George was genuinely pleased. I'll meet you at the airport. I have such plans. We're going to have a great time. Yes, yes, whatever you want. Yes, you're my beauty. I'm looking forward to it too. The conversation seemed to be coming to an end. Valerie crept shakily back to the door and slipped out onto the landing. She decided not to show George that she'd heard him talking, apparently to a certain Lana the Beautiful. At least that's what he called her. Yes, Valerie had no doubts about the excellent looks of George's date. Her husband had always been an aesthete. The woman entered the apartment a second time. Now she deliberately slammed the door loudly, marking her presence. George stepped out into the hallway. Valerie watched intently as the confusion, surprise, and disappointment in his eyes gradually replaced with contrived joy. Her husband had always been great at controlling himself, and now he quickly pulled himself together. If Valerie had not heard this conversation, she would not have noticed that her arrival was not happy news to her husband. "Are you back?" He smiled broadly. George was good at hiding his frustrations over frustrated plans. What an act. Postponed a business trip, Valerie answered. Her heart was pounding. Her feelings were giving her a headache. "Are you upset about it?" George asked. "You just don't have a face on you." "I felt sick in the cab," Valerie lied. "I want to lie down." She went into the bedroom and, without undressing, lay down on his and George's large bed. Trying not to think about the fact that perhaps the husband planned to invite the mistress here. How could it be? They had been through so much together, had walked so long and hard to create their prosperous, happy family, and had overcome all difficulties together. Shoulder to shoulder, they always supported each other. So many small and big victories behind them. From time to time, Valerie would find out that the husband of one of her colleagues or friends had a mistress. She resented it, complained, and was sure it would never happen in her family. And now this conversation. Her head ached, more and more nauseous. George, seeing his wife pale and lying there, was alarmed, and he brought her some painkillers and made a cold compress on her forehead. If it were not for the overheard conversation, Valerie would be glad of such care now. But then there would have been no malaise, because the woman had been overexcited and her blood pressure had spiked. She pressed her fingers to her temple. It made the headache easier to bear. She recalled her and George's acquaintance. It had been a fun, carefree time as a student. The girl was relaxing at a club, in the company of her classmates. It was there that he, a charming guy, caught her eye. A wide, white-toothed smile himself, smart and funny, and is also able, unlike Valerie herself, to dance. "Now that's a handsome man," remarked Elaine, a childhood friend. "Lucky you did not miss, eh, Valerie?" "Yes, George, of course, the prince." But now she just wanted to have fun with her friends. No romance, much less a serious relationship, was what she had in mind. Only recently Valerie had had a hard time getting rid of her ex-boyfriend, obsessive and constantly demanding attention. And now, the girl enjoyed the freedom of admiration in George's eyes. It was a comfort to Valerie's ego. She was pleased with his compliments and touches. He clearly hoped to continue communication outside the walls of the club. He even took Valerie's phone number. True, she purposely swapped a few numbers. She often did that. The girl had not planned a second meeting, so she tried to enjoy her time with the cute guy here and now. And then their student group decided to go to another club, closer to the house where Valerie lived. The girl said goodbye to a new acquaintance upset by this news. George, then unmarried, took her narrow palms in his, kissed her hand and said, "I'll be sure to call you back. I really like you. You're so beautiful, so special, I won't miss you." Valerie smiled. She felt like a real princess at that moment. The girl had always been popular with the opposite sex. She had what is called a model appearance. Tall, slender, long-legged. Her shiny brown hair falling below the shoulders and emerald green eyes were regularly received admiring looks and compliments. And each time it was very nice. As she did now, Valerie smiled sweetly goodbye to George, whom she thought she would never meet again, and got into the rather crowded car of her classmates, where her friends were already waiting for her. The merry company drove for a long time through the night streets of their hometown. The students laughed, sang their favorite songs, made plans for the coming summer, and Valerie, to her surprise, could not stop thinking about George. It wasn't the first time she had given a guy the wrong phone number. Only now, for some reason, she regretted it, feeling guilty before her new acquaintance for lying to him. The first person Valerie saw when they pulled up to the club was George. It turned out that he had taken a cab and followed their car, and was now walking toward her, smiling and opening his arms. The girl hurried toward the lad with joy and relief. What good fortune that he had guessed to do so. Valerie was afraid they would never meet again. George Valerie was always fun to be with. He knew exactly how to lift her spirits and make her laugh. Next to him, she felt safe from everything in the world and loved the girl. She understood, if necessary, George would do anything for her, and it was very pleasant. And somehow George immediately gained credibility with Valerie's friends, which was very important to her. And this could not help but make the girl proud of her such a witty and sociable young man. He, like Valerie, was a third-year student. Only he was studying at a different university, an architecture and construction university, and was already moonlighting in the company of his father's friend. Valerie, on the other hand, was completely immersed in her studies at an economics university in the accounting department. She was offered to study there by her parents, and she didn't mind. By the end of the 11th grade, she had no particular preference. An accountant is an accountant. Jobs would not be difficult to find, and accountants were needed everywhere. But George really loved everything related to architecture and could talk about his work for hours. Valerie loved to listen to his stories and look at the burning enthusiasm in his beloved's eyes. She had no doubt that George would achieve great success in life. In their 4th year, the couple decided to legalize their relationship, for they were sure of their feelings for each other. "I found my destiny. It's you," George once said. "I want to be with you all the time, not going on dates a few times a week. I want to fall asleep and wake up next to you. So what if we're still students? I don't want to procrastinate with the wedding." Valerie smiled happily. She felt the same way. The prospect of becoming George's wife and always being by his side was breathtaking. But parents on both sides actively opposed the ideas of the young, motivated by quite logical facts. Both were still studying and were not settled in life. There was nowhere to live. What's the rush? Date. Get married later when you finish your studies and find a job. That's when Valerie came up with the idea of telling her parents she was pregnant. So her mom and dad and her future mother-in-law quickly arranged a wedding. "It's a lie, of course," said George, "but what can you do if they need a good reason?" "It's their own fault," agreed Valerie. "Well, what if we really had a baby?" George suggested. "I really want us to have a baby. I'm already working. We'll live in my grandmother's empty apartment. I'll finish university. They'll make me head of the department right away. The boss has already promised me the job. So I'll feed us." "That's a great idea," Valerie rejoiced. She suddenly realized that she really wants a child from the man she loves. It will be the happiest and most beautiful baby in the world. But somehow the young couple's attempts were unsuccessful. The cherished pregnancy never came. True, at the time the young couple was not particularly worried, and without that in life was a lot of interesting. Parties, friends, studies, travel. When the newlyweds admitted to their parents that there was no child, they were not even angry. By that time, the adults were genuinely in love with their children and considered their decision to marry to be the right and responsible thing to do. They only laughed at Valerie and George's ingenuity and expressed the hope that they would not delay with their grandchildren after all. Finally, the diploma. Valerie and her husband are now young professionals. George, as promised, was promoted to department head. Valerie got a job as an accountant in a shopping mall. Now they were earning their own money. Not much, of course, for the time being, but my parents, out of habit, continued to help. So there was enough money not only for food and utilities, but also for entertainment. How good you are, admired Elaine, Valerie's friend. I only meet assholes for some reason. Valerie sincerely felt sorry for the unsuccessful in private life woman and thanked fate for what she had sent her such a faithful, loving, reliable man like George. Friends and colleagues were constantly complaining about their boyfriends and husbands. During these conversations, Valerie felt a little uncomfortable. She couldn't keep up the conversation because she had nothing to reproach George for. As time went on, the newlyweds gradually managed to get their lives together. George and Valerie were house children, looked after by their parents, so the chores of the home were a challenge for both of them at first. It turned out that Valerie's long hair quickly clogged the drain. The dishes themselves would not wash. Dust accumulates incredibly quickly in the corners, and regularly ordered restaurant meals are destroying the family budget. The newlyweds were in for many such surprises. It got to the point where Valerie would type the phrase, "Where can I get red water for borscht at?" She prepared dinner. As she prepared dinner, the couple stood the test of everyday life with dignity. Both quickly enough learned how to cook and clean, and even did repairs in the apartment on their own. Another test of their marriage awaited them. They had been married for 5 years, but they still had no children. Even Elaine managed to give birth to a son. True, she was raising her Andrew now alone. His father considered himself too young for such responsibility and disappeared into the unknown. But Valerie was still almost jealous of her friend looking at her miracle. A tiny cute kitty, and desperately dreamed of her baby. George also really wanted to be a father. Hospital examinations began. Valerie was diagnosed with serious reproductive health problems. Medications, ultrasounds, tests, treatments. All this is exhausting both mentally and physically. But for the sake of his dream, girl did not give up. George was by her side and supported her spouse in everything. This is probably our punishment for lying to our parents back then. As if we were expecting a baby, Valerie sighed sorrowfully, looking at another negative pregnancy test. So come on. We meant well. We didn't do anything wrong either. And anyway, don't give up. Everything will work out. But nothing worked out. When all possible treatments were tried, the doctor recommended EF. Valerie and George were sure that now they would become parents very soon. But 3 attempts were unsuccessful. Valerie lay on her bed and just stared at the ceiling. The strength to cry was gone. She realized that she would never become a mother. Everything is useless, and to mock her own body, again to hope, and then to be disappointed, she no longer wants. And then George came up. "Let's try again," he said. "Only I read the forums, some people only succeed on the 8th or 9th try, and we're only on the 4th. So here's how it works. 4th try and that's it. If we fail again, we'll take the kid from the orphanage. Do you agree?" Valerie jumped up on the bed. She had once suggested that her husband look at the orphanage, but he had flatly refused. He wanted a blood child. He did not want to raise a stranger's son or daughter. Valerie, on the other hand, didn't care. She longed to give love and warmth to a tiny, defenseless human being, even if it wasn't born to her. This desire overshadowed everything else, filled the woman's thoughts. George remained adamant. He made arguments about bad genetics and the difficulties of adaptation. He did not want another man's child, and he had every right to. Valerie put up with his opinion, so her husband offers to take the baby out of the orphanage himself. But before that, he asked for another chance at a native heir. Of course, this time Valerie happily agreed to if. She went to the procedure in a completely different mood. One way or another, Soon her cherished dream will come true. She would become a mother. No one knows what played the primary role. The new therapy or Valerie's positive attitude, but this was the fourth time it all worked out. Valerie looked at the test with 2 lines and cried with happiness, and soon George joined her. The pregnancy was difficult, and Lera was often in the hospital. George took full charge of household chores and almost dusted off his wife. He did everything she asked and anticipated her slightest desires, even asking her to leave her job. "You don't have to go there now. You're wasting your nerves. You should rest. It is better to have a baby. When the baby grows up, we'll find you a new job. My salary is enough for everything. And next year I will be promoted." Valerie happily plunged into the life of a housewife. A loving husband, a comfortable new apartment, and soon there will be a baby. What else do you need to be happy? "Oh, what a clever woman. So arranged her life well," said approvingly her friend, often dropping in to visit. Not like me, a single mother who was torn between work and her son, and Ryushka already went to first grade. Alain really looked tired, thin, anxious, always somewhere in a hurry. Not in vain I told you at the club that time. "I do," Valerie agreed. She had written the wrong phone number that night. If he hadn't followed them to the club, none of this would be happening now. I can't even imagine. And then Kate was born. The young parents and new grandparents couldn't be happier. Now their family was even stronger and happier. True, Valerie, after a long treatment, difficult pregnancy, and childbirth, began to have problems with blood pressure. She often felt sick. George, in these moments, perfectly coped with the baby, bought her daughter, feeding her from a bottle, entertained the baby, even swaddled the newborn, and all he did not do it worse than she did. Kate grew up smart and active, but she was very sickly. She often caught colds and bronchitis in kindergarten, so Valerie had to postpone going to work. Maternity leave dragged on until the daughter was 5 years old, and then Valerie invited her best friend to her company. They had just become vacant, so the women became colleagues. Life got back on track. Kate was already a first grader. Valerie was working. George became the head of a large branch of his company, which was located in Novosibirsk. There were no problems with money. Her husband fully provided for the family. Valerie thought they had an ideal relationship. Yes, romance is not so much. Sometimes it was very missing, but after all, they have so many years together. It's normal. The main thing is trust, reliability, mutual support, and now this conversation. Valerie felt like she couldn't handle the pressure. It seemed to her that these health problems were a thing of the past. Then, after giving birth, George found the best doctors for her. The new mom was given the right therapy, and she forgot about the headaches for many years. But now the stress had set in, and they were back. By evening, George couldn't take it anymore and called his wife an ambulance. She was diagnosed with a hypertensive crisis and taken to the hospital. She had to lie down for about a week. During that time, the woman pulled herself together. She had no right to torment herself like that. She has a little daughter and a beloved husband. Yes, he has made a mistake, but Valerie knows the situation. Perhaps this unknown Lana has seduced and deceived him. Valerie is not going to just give up. She's been building her strong, happy family for a long time. She and George have done everything possible and impossible together. And now what? Give her husband to some woman? Oh no. That's the last thing I need. Kate needs a father, and she needs a reliable, caring husband, and Valerie will still fight for her family. This decision gave the woman strength and vigor. There was plenty of time at the hospital to get busy looking for the beautiful stranger. Valerie only knew her name for now, but social media was enough. First of all, the woman began monitoring her husband's accounts. George had many friends and followers. Colleagues, friends, partners, just acquaintances. Lanus was abundant among them. The ladies of Valerie's age were rejected immediately. Then it was the turn of women. Not up to her husband's aesthetic tastes. George has always preferred beautiful, slender, well-groomed girls. Girls like Valerie herself. The remaining Lena's beauties from her husband's pages were 3. These young women did not look too suspicious. All of them showed their own happy families on social media. Their profiles were littered with photos with their other halves. But who knows? It's not a fact that Mistress George is single. How many cases are there when married ladies decide to divorce a little and make a friend on the side? And yet Valerie's intuition told her that the Lanas were not the right one. Suddenly the search engine gave Valerie several accounts with the notation, "Perhaps you know each other." Among them was Peter, George's colleague from the Novosibirsk branch. On the main photo he was clearly posing for a corporate party, and their company logo was flaunting in the background. Valerie was interested. Her husband never showed her pictures from the holidays he flew to Novosibirsk. He said he wasn't interested in collecting that garbage. And in general, he hates being photographed. And now Valerie wanted to see how their corporate holiday. Since Peter put a picture of the party on the cover, there's bound to be a couple more in his profile. Valerie went to the page of a colleague of her husband. As she expected, he had a whole album of photos from corporate events. The woman flipped through it with interest. In some pictures, she noticed her husband. He seemed to be deliberately hiding from the cameras, and the photographer managed to photograph him only briefly at a half-turn, or even from the back. Valerie smiled. Old George didn't like to be photographed as a child. His mother told me a funny story about it. But soon the woman was no laughing matter. In the next photo there were 3 of them, Peter, George, and a beautiful, bright girl with distinct facial features. Valerie's husband was standing in the center, and the lady was snuggling up to him. And he habitually, naturally, put his arm around her thin waist. Something wasn't quite right here. Valerie shifted her eyes downward. Each of the characters in the photographs was marked: George Sokolov and Lana Petrova. Valerie seemed to have accidentally stumbled upon what she was looking for. The woman quickly went to the girl's page. There were a lot of pictures of her there. The beauty clearly liked to be photographed. You bet she did, with looks like that. She was just a supermodel. Lana at the resort, Lana in a luxurious restaurant, Lana at the pool, and everywhere alone. Is such a beauty alone. It just can't be. I'm sure she has no shortage of suitors. And suddenly, Valerie saw a picture from the sea. It was some foreign resort. White sand, bright sun, palm trees, turquoise waves. Lana was photographing a beautiful landscape. The man must have walked into the frame by accident. He was standing with his back to the lens, but Valerie recognized her husband. His figure, the birthmark on his neck, and the T-shirt she had given him. There was no doubt. This was the same Lana that her husband had invited to Moscow on her business trip. That same mistress. And they are all serious. Even fly to the sea together. These travels George must have explained to her business trips, which lately he was too much. So what now? At least Valerie knows the enemy by sight. Lana was in her last year of university when she met George. It happened in a bar where she and her classmates were celebrating the end of the session. A handsome young man in an expensive business suit was relaxing at a nearby table with a few friends, or rather colleagues. Those two were dressed in strict jackets and slacks. Businessmen, I guess. Eugenia, my dorm roommate, and classmate Lana squinted at them. They're all so cool. Come on, they're old for us. And they're probably married, but at least let me dream. So well groomed. Not like our guys, Eugenia continued to admire. After a couple of glasses of wine, she always became kinder to the opposite sex. Every man seemed to her almost like a prince. But the men in this nearby company did look attractive. Stylish, trim, handsome. One in particular stood out. Gray eyes, white teeth, and a wide smile that made dimples appear on his cheeks. Lana tried not to look in his direction. "Look, they're staring at us," said Eugenia admiringly. "Of course they are. You can't take your eyes off them. They're staring at you, wondering. Calm down, will you?" "Lana, they're coming." In fact, one of the men approached their table, not the man Eugenia liked in the light. He introduced himself to Peter and asked Eugenia if she would dance with him. The woman happily agreed. Lana finished her cocktails while she watched her friend dance, apparently determined to get close to her admirer no matter what. He wasn't lost either. Obviously, Lana would be going to the dormitory alone tonight. She was so sick of it. If they went somewhere with her, in 90% of cases, she would quickly find another suitor, and then Lana would either sit alone all night or fight off the friends of Eugenia's chosen one. And tonight it was the same again. Peter's friends and colleagues were also watching the scene. Lana was sure that sooner or later one of them would approach her, and secretly hoped it would be the gray-eyed one. But another man, the oldest of the group, with an expensive watch on his hand and glasses in stylish frames, stood aside from the table. "Good evening," he introduced himself, taking a seat next to Lana. What a banal trick. I expected something more original from a representative of the older generation. "I'm not sad about being alone. I enjoy it." The girl not too subtly hinted at being left alone, but the newfound admirer didn't give up. "My name is Sergio," he introduced himself. "I just can't resist your beauty. You look like a young Nicole Kidman. Has anyone ever told you that?" "More than once." "May I ask your name?" "No." "You don't have to be so adamant about saying no. You just don't realize you're missing out on a great opportunity. I have much to give you. Give me some peace first." Lana was getting annoyed. "Oh, that Eugenia. She's out there on the dance floor with her boyfriend, and she has to fight off an obsessive suitor again because of her, who absolutely does not understand the hints or direct refusal." Sergio, meanwhile, moved closer to Lana. He was drunk. This was partly the reason for his underhandedness. Surely, in ordinary life, this man is tactful and intelligent. Some people shouldn't drink at all. They turn into animals like that. Sergio put his hand on the back of Lana's chair and looked at the girl with admiring eyes. It was unpleasant. She stood up, intending to leave, but the man held her by the arm of his palm, gripping her wrist tightly. "Where are you going? We haven't even met yet." "I have to go. I have to go." "I'll show you out." Sergio jumped up from his seat. He never let go of her wrist. "Let go of me already," Lana shouted loudly. He didn't even think of loosening his grip. Maybe he hadn't heard or understood what was being said. Cocktails played a role in his behavior. Sergio, instead of letting go of the light, suddenly hugged her. It was too much. The girl elbowed the sassy man right in the soft belly with all her might. He groaned, and for a moment he parted his embrace. Anger flashed in the man's eyes. It frightened the girl. Anything was to be expected from a drunken stranger. She tried to slip away, but he grabbed her again. This time he grabbed her roughly and firmly, and this time she felt in pain. "We must talk." "Sit down," Sergio asked. "Sergio, what are you doing?" "Calm down." The gray-eyed man came up to them. Luckily, he noticed what was going on at the table and rushed to help, either to save his friend from a possible trouble or to protect his girlfriend. For some reason, Lana immediately felt safe and understood that everything was going to work out. Why her? Sergio's speech became more and more incoherent. Two other men from the company approached them and took the poorly thinking friend to their table. "You'll have to excuse him," he smiled. "We closed the deal today. We're celebrating." "Thank you," replied Lana. She could not take her eyes away from the beautiful and intelligent eyes of that man. She just drowned in them because up close he looked even more attractive than he seemed from a distance. For some reason she felt a terrible urge to run her hand over his cheeks, touched with light stubble. This had never happened to her before. Lana painfully invented a pretext to prolong her communication with him. She did not want to part with the man, and fate took pity on her. Everything worked itself out, and having danced enough, he flopped down at the table. "Let's sit here. Look how cool the girls are." Eugenia giggled stupidly, looking adoringly at her beau. George stayed at the table, and Lana realized that he was the reason a hot wave ran through her body. She was more and more attracted to George, as if she were magnetically drawn to him. He turned out to be a very interesting and witty conversationalist. He seemed to be able to hold a conversation on any topic, and with his opinions Lana wanted to agree every time. She wished the evening would never end. After all, it was unlikely that she would ever meet this man who had such a strange influence on her again. From the table conversations, the girl realized that he lives and works in Moscow and came here on a business trip. George, to Lana's disappointment, didn't even try to get her phone number, most likely married, and he didn't need a relationship on the side. Yes, the girl felt that she liked George, and it was very pleasant. But he behaved as discreetly as possible, not showing his sympathy in any way. Lana hoped that she did not give away her sudden feelings either. Until this moment, she did not understand what passion, love, and other concepts from romantic books and movies meant. It had seemed to her that these were imaginary categories, and that there was no such thing. But now she herself was caught up in the whirlpool of feelings and had no idea what to do with it all. The evening was rapidly drawing to a close. The bar closed at 2 o'clock in the morning. Eugenia and Peter decided to take a cab and go on their walk. George and Lana were also invited, but the man at once declines, claiming that he has an important meeting in the afternoon. Lana immediately came up with some excuse not to go with the nice couple. When Eugenia and Peter drove off into the night, George offered to walk Lana home. Lana's heart began to race. Was what she had been dreaming about all night really happening? Could it really hook him, and they will begin a relationship without witnesses, and he finally dared to make a step forward? Her heart fluttered in joyful anticipation. The girl was waiting for George to kiss her, or at least embrace her. But he behaved a little aloof again, though he joked and smiled a lot. And on the porch of the student dormitory, he took Lana's phone number. She happily dictated the numbers to him and realized that from that moment on, she was going to live her life waiting for a call. There wasn't a long wait. George called the very next day, inviting her to a movie. After the movie, they strolled along the waterfront, then stopped at a luxurious restaurant. Lana had been living in Novosibirsk for 5 years, but had no idea that there were such places here. The girl felt a little uncomfortable, but Lana helped her relax. He simply put his hand on her palm, and that was it. Her worries and discomfort disappeared like never before. Then he suggested that we go to his place. Of course, Lana knew what that meant, and George, too, knew that she knew what she was getting into. So he did not insist, but gave her a choice. Lana agreed without the slightest hesitation. The corporate apartment turned out to be as upscale and presentable as George himself. It was stylish, bright, spacious, and modern. The furnishings were clearly the work of a designer. Lana did not understand whether the company bought the apartment for George or just rented it for an employee because he often has to visit Novosibirsk. That's how they began to meet. On their first night, the couple sat cozily on the couch in the living room. George invited Lana to stay with him instead of going to the dormitory for the night. The girl gladly accepted the invitation, She did not want to leave George. And so they watched some show on TV with each other, ate rolls ordered from the restaurant, and drank insanely delicious champagne. Finally, the girl decided on the important question that had been bugging her. "And you, are you married?" "Is you married? Does it matter? Does it matter?" On the one hand, it really didn't matter. She feels happy around George. She wants to see the face and smell the man she loves, to feel his touch and to bathe in this man's admiration and care, and also to become part of his beautiful life. Yes, Lana was not lying to herself. She loved that George was so successful and wealthy. But that wasn't the only thing that attracted her to him. And his wife, she was somewhere very far away in Moscow. What difference did it make whether she even existed or not? On the other hand, Lana understood that it was not good to have an affair with a married man. It was always a betrayal, and the outcome was often sad, sometimes even tragic. The girl herself had lectured her friend Eugenia many times when she was too fond of married men. And yet George attracted Lana, charming, mesmerizing. To be near him, she was willing to transcend all her principles and moral turmoil. After all, Lana wasn't going to take him out of the family, at least for the time being. It is enough for her to feel at least occasionally as a woman of this strong, confident, and intelligent man. George showed Lana a very different life. The girl came to Novosibirsk to study from the village, and long got used to the city. There was a time, even embarrassed to go with classmates in a cheap cafe. She hadn't seen anything like that in her Semyonovka. Such places seemed too luxurious to her. She felt lost and ridiculous there. Gradually, Lana got accustomed to Novosibirsk. It was easier and more fun to adapt with her roommate, Eugenia, the same village girl. Looking at other students and taking their advice, Lana learned how to dress and wear makeup in such a way as to advantageously emphasize the advantages of her appearance. And movie theaters, cafes, and bars soon stopped scaring her. Boys, students, and even teachers began to pay attention to Lana. The girl realized the power of her beauty, but was in no hurry to use it to the fullest. Not like Eugenia, who seemed to be trying to take everything from her freshness and youth at once. Lana, on the other hand, having seen many stories in her village and in the city, was also determined. First, she would get a degree, and then she would arrange her personal life, certainly with a decent and successful man. They would have a wonderful family, an ideal one. Lana will never again live in the poverty of her childhood, and she will certainly not return to her village. On the contrary, she would bring her mother and brother here. The girl had global plans, and she walked confidently toward her goal. She practically got straight A's at her pedagogical university. However, she definitely did not plan to work as a biology or geography teacher. She thought she would find something more prestigious and well-paid after graduation. Coming to the department immediately after school, the girl thought little about the prospects. She went where she was sure to score enough points and the competition was small. And now she had George in her life. And with it, the trips to restaurants, luxurious gifts, long conversations on interesting topics, vivid impressions, new acquaintances. It wasn't more than 2 months after the start of their relationship when George suggested that Lana fly with him to Thailand for a few days. The girl gladly took the plunge into this beautiful sea fairy tale. Later, such trips became quite frequent. It was easy for George to explain his absence to his family by his business trips and business travels. Lana, on the other hand, tried not to think about the fact that her man had another life. His wife and daughter are in Moscow, after all. Of course, she almost immediately scoured the social media favorite man and saw photos of his wife. The beautiful, successful woman looked very harmonious paired with the imposing George. Together they looked just perfect. Lana could not help but recognize this fact, although it hurt her, The girl had no plans to fall in love with George, or anyone else for that matter. She had other goals for now, but she couldn't help herself. Just yesterday, Lana was an ordinary student who often had to eat instant noodles for dinner, even with Eugenia sometimes sharing this delicacy. She counted on a small stipend and saved for everything. And today the staff of the most elite establishments in Novosibirsk knew her by sight. She herself now lived in the very corporate apartment George had so delighted her with. In a stylish studio stuffed to the brim with smart appliances, with a spacious bathroom. In it she liked to lie down with a flask of cold champagne, like the girls in the movies about the beautiful life. George flew to Novosibirsk every month, sometimes more than one. Work issues demanded it. But Lana suspected that his business trips became so frequent because of her. She also understood that George really took her very seriously, not as just another mistress. And he was not that kind of character to change women like gloves. Lana knew that this was George's first and only relationship on the side. And she saw that the man was very upset by the fact that he had to lie to his wife, but he couldn't give up on Lana either. When the girl graduated from university, George took her to his branch office in human resources. Lana had to learn a lot, practically from scratch, to master a new specialty. But she did it, and she liked her job very much. And what a salary! Almost every month she received handsome bonuses, and she was glad she did. The girl was aware that she would never have found a job at that salary if it had not been for George, and she was grateful to him for the opportunity to get back on her feet. It was very important to her. As time went on, some of the employees in the company, of course, began to guess about the relationship between the branch manager and Lena. They talked and got used to it. The girl cared little. But she knew that sooner or later some well-wisher would report everything to George's wife. And then what would happen? It was hard to guess. But as the years passed, everything remained the same. Perhaps that was something to be thankful for. 1,000 miles separating Moscow and Novosibirsk. Distance made it possible to hide everything. Lana felt George needed her. He anticipated her desires, showered her with compliments, was always gentle and caring. With him, the girl felt loved and understood that hardly anyone else could give her such emotions. Over the 4 years that they were together, Sveta honestly tried several times to break the relationship. Still, the role of mistress could hardly be called enviable. She understood that George would never belong only to her. Hope for a different outcome was negligible. Besides, it was unpleasant to participate in the betrayal of his wife. He did not discourage these attempts, for he understood that Leni needed to build his family. He didn't, but when she was alone, the girl inevitably began to pine for a loved one so much that it was necessary to climb up against the wall. She missed his voice, his smell, his touch, like air. Lana tried to fill that void with other relationships, but no one could compare to George. And the girl kept coming back to him, and he seemed to be just waiting for that. And again he showered his love on her. Attention, care. Again made her feel exceptional. Valerie was released from the hospital. Now she was perfectly fine, both physically and mentally. The woman reflected on the situation and realized that she would fight for the man she loved and for her family. This decision gave her strength and confidence. But Valerie needed allies. No one but her faithful friend Alain could share the details of this story with her. "Gee," Alain said thoughtfully, as she listened to Valerie. The women were sitting in a coffee house near the office. It was the only place where they could get away from the ears of their colleagues. Yes, pies like that. I never would have thought such a thing of George from the outside. The perfect husband and father. The strange thing is, he is. He really is a wonderful husband and father. They've been together for 4 years, and I had no idea. With his schedule, it's not surprising. Always on the road. It's easy to hide not just a mistress, but a second family. So what have you decided? What are you going to do? I want George to understand that I am more important to him, and that no young beauty is worth the loss of his family. I just wish I could do it without George knowing that I knew he was in a relationship with me. So you don't have a plan? Elaine clarified. What's the plan there? I have very little information. I only know her name and that she works in the Novosibirsk branch. I'm sure that's where George put her. But I also saw her photo. She is beautiful, even very... So we need more information, Elaine concluded. Lera liked it very much. She understood that now she had a reliable support in the person of her best friend. But where to get this information? I do not know Yegor's colleagues from Novosibirsk. I do not even know anyone to ask. I have an idea. Suddenly Elaine struck me. Really, what is it? Wait, I do not want to reassure you yet. I will call you in the evening. And her friend kept her promise. Indeed, she called in the evening and laid out her simple as all brilliant plan. Elaine's brother had a friend who was an it guy. He was the one who helped Valerie install the software with which she could now control her husband's social networks and messengers. If anything, you don't know me. I don't know you, the young man half jokingly and half seriously warned her. Now Valerie could see all her husband's correspondence with family and friends, colleagues, partners, but most importantly, with her, the young blue-eyed girl who had broken into their family. Of course, the woman felt some remorse because she had so treacherously invaded her lover's personal space. But, on the other hand, he had done far worse to her. Valerie quickly realized that things were serious enough between Lana and George. She lives in his corporate apartment, cooking him delicious dinners there. When George flies to Novosibirsk on business, apparently tries very hard, especially seeks out delicious recipes. Not that Valerie herself. Work and the child take so much time and energy, so that lately she only has time for pasta and sausages, and the apartment is often not cleaned. True, George had never once expressed dissatisfaction with the household chores. On the contrary, when he had time, he took care of chores without being asked. But maybe he was still not enough care and attention, Valerie. With the arrival of the long-awaited child, the woman really began to spend a lot less time with her husband. Could it be her fault for what happened? No. Those are the wrong thoughts. It wasn't easy for her either, but she didn't go looking for a lover. George and Lana occasionally flew together on vacations. Valerie understood this from the correspondence, which included phrases like, either alike when we were in Italy or we've been to resorts by the sea many times before. I want to try something new. Maybe Scandinavian countries. They seem to have traveled halfway around the world. It was a shame. After all, Valerie was sympathetic to her husband's busy schedule. Yes, they didn't spend much time together, but the woman thought her husband worked for the good of their family. And now it turns out that many of those business trips were just a cover for traveling with an entourage. Reading the correspondence, Valerie realized many things. This girl is really in love with George, and Lana is giving him what his husband can't get in his family. Passion, free time, vivid emotions, blind adoration. But if he were really ready to leave his wife for her, he would have already done so. George is clearly serious about Lana, but apparently does not truly love her. Things can change. For example, a young mistress will bear him a child. And then George will never leave them. And in general, little by little, Lana can bind her man to herself, to fall in love with him. Therefore, it is necessary to act decisively and as quickly as possible. But the plan did not work out. Elaine could not help her advice. I'm a single mother. What kind of counselor am I? Said a confused friend. Just know that if you need my help, I'm always in touch. Thank you. You've been very helpful. At least now I know the little nuances of their relationship. So, how's it going? How does it feel to know that her husband isn't going on a business trip but to see her? It hurts, admitted Valerie. But it's still better than being in the dark. Lana had long thought about starting her own business. She decided to try and open a few shipping centers for a popular online store. She had thoroughly researched all the necessary information and made a business plan, but the funds she had saved were clearly insufficient to get her started. Lana was sure that George would be happy to help her. He had always supported all endeavors and encouraged her development in all areas. So this time George was pleased with her mistress's idea. "What a wonderful idea," he praised, "and the direction is promising. With the paperwork, if anything, I'll help. It's easy. I'll help, it's easy. I'm short of money, and Lana voiced the missing amount, a pretty decent amount, but not astronomical for George. I can't get that much out at once. I'll fly to Moscow, you remind me, and I'll transfer it." She simply enjoyed George's presence in her life. His attention, support, patronage. She was still fascinated by his gray eyes, and she still melted at this man's touch, just as she had on the first day she had met him. As arranged, Lana sent George a text message reminding him of the money transfer. Her lover had never refused her anything. The girl was used to it, so she had no doubt that now she would get what she wanted. But the message about the transfer of funds did not come, and time was running out. Rent, advertising, and utilities had to be paid, and storage racks had to be paid, and storage racks had to be purchased. Lena texted George again and was told he was working it out. Eventually, George called and said in a frustrated voice that it wasn't going to work out. His family urgently needed money for something. Lana didn't get into details. The man promised that next month he would definitely help her. Lana leaned back in her chair. Now she distinctly felt herself in a secondary role. The family needed money, and George chose his wife in this situation easily and without the slightest doubt. Next to him, Lana was used to feeling superior to everyone else. Perhaps she was even in love with this sense of self. But now the girl has fully seen the minuses of her status. She is only a mistress. She has no right even to be offended. George does so much for her. Valerie, of course, read the text message from Lena. The one in which the mistress reminded George that he had promised to give her money to develop her business. This message both pleased and angered the woman at the same time. What pleased her was that the girl was apparently taking good advantage of her husband. George could not ignore that. He is far from a fool. The easier it will be to convince him of his mistress' mercantile interest, which will look especially ugly against the background of his wife's sincere love and affection. What angered Valerie was the fact that Lana is too possessive of her husband's resources, and he seems to be easily taken advantage of. "No, Lana, you will never get any money out of the family budget." George had to work late that evening. Valerie had time to prepare a delicious dinner. Sitting at the table, her husband admired her cooking abilities and praised the dishes. "Better than in a restaurant," her husband admitted. "I'm glad you like it," smiled Valerie. "How was your day?" "Oh, the usual. It was all right. And my car broke down," said Valerie. "Infiniti," surprised George. "I bought your car not long ago. The car is good, reliable. I'll send a mechanic tomorrow." "No need. I already took it to the service. It needs repair, expensive." "How much?" And then Valerie named the amount, only slightly less than what she asked her lover. George was silent, thoughtful. Valerie realized that he was figuring out whether he could help both his wife and Lana at the same time, and deciding whom to sponsor first. A lot depended on his choice now, and his wife helped him make it. "I need a car right away. My daughter has a competition coming up. I can't miss training every day, and I have to travel a lot for work every day. You know, we got spots all over town." George, immediately at the table, transferred Valerie the necessary amount of money. And then, a little later, the woman read her husband's message in which he justified himself to Lana. The mistress never received the money she had been promised. What made Valerie most happy was the fact that George had chosen her over Lana. After all, the mistress also had a good enough reason. She wanted to start her own business. And yet her husband helped his wife. Surely Lana has noted this to herself and now suffers. Serves her right for knowing her place. The money situation upset Lana and even disappointed her, but she pulled herself together and life went on. The next month, George did find the missing funds for her, and the girl started her own business. She had a wise helper and mentor in the person of the man she loved, so the experience was a success. Soon invested money started to bring a good income. True, Lana got more cares, but she even liked being so busy. No time and energy to think about his unenviable position of a mistress. The new year was approaching, a holiday she had loved since childhood. Lana adored the scent of pine needles. She was mesmerized by the colorful lights and garlands. She was no longer a little girl, but as before she associated the end of December with the expectation of a miracle. And this time, the miracle did happen. George sent a text message, which asked instead of an evening dress for the corporate party to buy a beautiful new swimsuit. He suggested we fly together to the Arab Emirates on New Year's Eve weekend to escape for a few days in the bustle that always accompanies the end of the year. It sounded just delightful. Of course, Lana replied that she gladly accepted the offer and went to the mall that same day. She wanted to look flawless for George. On this vacation, Lana liked to see his rapturous gaze, to hear compliments in his address. That's why she picked up the beach closet, maximally emphasizing the numerous advantages of her appearance. The girl was sure that not only George would admire her on the beach. Let the beloved see what success his girlfriend enjoys with others. Lana had read somewhere that it increases the value of the chosen one in the eyes of men. She already anticipated how they would splash in the warm waters of the Persian Gulf and rock in the local discos, and then relax in luxury hotel suites. The trip promised to be wonderful. From Valerie's attention, of course, her husband's plans did not escape her. She was still closely following his correspondence. George is going with his mistress to Dubai before the new year. A romantic vacation for two. Another one. This time Valerie decided to disrupt the sweet couple's plans. Plan matured quickly. The woman dialed the number of a well-known ski resort and booked a house for the New Year's Eve. It was not difficult. The influx of tourists was scheduled for the New Year vacations, and now there was a lull. Then the woman took the second step. She began to gather the company of George's friends and colleagues, so she knew she couldn't refuse him. First, she decided to enlist the support of Alexander, a former classmate and best friend of her spouse. "Alex, hello, how are you?" Valerie cooed into the tube. "I have an interesting idea. Would you like to go skiing with us next weekend? I checked. There are a lot of free houses there and not many people. It's a great time for a vacation." Alexander happily agreed. He promised that he would definitely come with his wife to the base, and they would take the children with them, so Kate would not be bored. After that, Valerie made some more calls and invited a couple of her husband's colleagues with their couples to join them. And in the evening, she presented the news to her husband about their plans for the weekend. "I have a surprise for you." "What kind, I wonder?" George looked intrigued. "We're going to the ski resort this weekend. I've invited our friends and your colleagues. There will be fun pre-New Year's adventures, and the holiday itself will be quiet and peaceful. Just the three of us." But George was taken aback. He had already made arrangements with Lana, booked a ticket and a hotel. "But why didn't you consult me?" "Oh, I wanted to surprise you Valerie smiled innocently. "You've been so busy and tired lately. You just need to relax and take your mind off things." George really wanted to relax, but he had other plans. He hadn't been spending much time with Lana lately. There was also the guilt he felt towards her for not being able to give her the right amount of money right away, and opening a business had to be postponed. "I have a lot of work," as he finally found himself. "I will not be able to go. But I talked to your boss. Valerie did not give up. I asked him to come with us. He even complimented me on the great idea." Wow. Yegor did not expect such a turnaround. "The chief is going with them. We'll have to cancel our trip to Dubai." "How are we going to tell Lana about this? She'll be very upset." The girl was looking forward to the trip. She was getting ready. She had already sent him pictures of her new swimsuits. George couldn't wait to see those designer clothes on the beautiful girl. But now it seems, instead of a bright beach holiday, we'll have to freeze at the ski resort. "Hi, baby." George's voice sounded guilty. Lana knew immediately that something was wrong. "I can't fly with you to Dubai," the man said bluntly. "What? But you suggested it. I was so ready." "You go, take a friend with you. Have fun. And I have some urgent business." "What kind of things? Why are you leaving me alone again?" "My wife suddenly and unexpectedly organized a trip to the ski resort with my friends and colleagues. She even invited my boss. So there's no way to refuse. Even the urgent business trip is not to refer to." Lana furiously pressed the reset button. Burning tears came to her eyes. Again, it was his wife. Of course, she had been invisibly present in his relationship with George before, but he had somehow managed to work it out, as if she didn't even exist. And lately Valerie had been too much. Lana had long been mentally prepared to spend New Year's Eve alone again. It's always been that way. After all, a family holiday, George usually spent it in a circle of family and friends, which the mistress was not included. But this time still would have warmed the memories of a romantic vacation in Dubai. And so she again felt like a spare part in the fine-tuned mechanism of George's life. That, of course, was how it really was. But every reminder of that was painful. Maybe she should go on vacation with Eugenia. Why, it's all paid for. A friend is free, like a bird. She would gladly fly with her to the ends of the earth. And so she did. With Eugenia, they had a great time on the shore of the Persian Gulf. They splashed in the warm waves, sunbathed, danced in the disco, and flirted a lot. Lana tried to behave discreetly, but in the end she too could not resist a handsome student from England. He was 3 years younger than her, and seemed to have a real crush on the Russian girl. Although Lana immediately told him that their romance was strictly resort, just for a few days. The young man made her feel needed and adorable. But Lana understood that neither he nor anyone else could replace George. The pre-holiday weekend flew by like the blink of an eye. It was time to go home. Lana realized that she missed George very much and would forgive him anything. Though, of course, as they say, the resentment had passed, but the residue remained. Valerie felt like a winner again. They just had a wonderful couple of days at the base, went skiing and walking in the winter woods, barbecuing, drinking a nice mulled wine. A big and friendly company played board games, laughing a lot, talking about interesting topics. Valerie listened to many thanks for guessing to bring everyone together and arrange this trip. Most importantly, they were together during this time. Valerie and George took their time, enjoyed each other's company, hugged each other all the time, and laughed. Valerie decided that they should do this more often. It was clearly good for their relationship. At first, George looked anxious and lost. Apparently, he couldn't stop thinking about his lonely, abandoned Lena. But then he relaxed, calmed down, and began to enjoy the winter holidays. And his mistress flew to Dubai with a friend. That's wonderful. Valerie sincerely hoped that she would meet some rich man there and not return to Russia. Why, Lana is a blue-eyed blonde, a real beauty. So this option is quite possible. But as much as Valerie would have liked it, the problem did not solve itself. Lana came back and immediately started texting George about how much she missed him. It was okay, Valerie wasn't going to give up. Lana had a beloved little brother. She had been raising him since he was in diapers, helping his ever-busy, tired mother. Now Alex has grown up. He's 18 years old. Time flew by quickly. He grew from a cute little white-haired toddler to a handsome young man. The boy went to a sports college. He was given a dormitory. Alex began his college life. Of course, he often came to see his sister. She always happily welcomed her relative and even helped him with money, but the young man wanted to earn his own money. "I am looking for a job," he confessed to Lana. It seems that they promised to hire him as a courier in the delivery service. "You'll be moving around the city with a huge box on your shoulders in the snow and in the cold." "Well," her sister shook her head. "You don't even have a car, so you could at least drive a car. Otherwise, you'll have to walk and take buses." "But what can you do?" "For now, we'll see. Everybody works somehow." Lana grimaced. It's different for everyone. And the older sister reminded her brother of a recent story in their city. A delivery guy, a young girl, brought an order to an apartment and got into the clutches of drunken guys. The girl miraculously survived her encounter with the scumbags. But it was a girl, and I'm a man. Alex brushed him off. "What are you comparing? You think because you're a guy, no one can scare you?" "Well, kinda." Alex smiled. "Oh, come on. You're kinda shady around town, aren't you? You used to be calmer." "All right, I'll talk to someone. Maybe I can get you a job driving for our firm. There must be a lot of applicants there. The salaries are good." "There are a lot of applicants," Lana agreed, "but not all of them have a sister working in the personnel department." Of course, the girl immediately wrote to George. Their branch did indeed have an opening for a driver to unload materials. As a human resources officer, Lana couldn't have been unaware of it. The job wasn't much. The pay was good. Alex would be able to combine study and work perfectly and wouldn't need the money. George replied that he would solve the problem. Lana was sure that she would apply for the vacancy tomorrow or the day after. Valerie read the message about the vacancy and wondered. Another request that could be used in the struggle for marital happiness. The mistress would again be left with nothing. The woman suddenly remembered that she had a nephew living in Novosibirsk, and she dialed the number of great-aunt of his mother. It turned out that the nephew works at a local factory, receives a penny. The situation was perfect. Valerie happily told her aunt about the job opening and promised to talk to her husband. "And how did you know that the Novosibirsk branch requires a driver?" George looked at his wife, surprised. She had just asked him to take her cousin-nephew to this place, describing beforehand how important to her relations with these relatives and how she wanted to help them. "I found out by chance. I bumped into Tanya, your boss's wife, at the mall." George wondered how bad timing was, all of this. He promised a place to his brother Lana. "She will be upset again, but we had already found the man." "George, I called human resources. The position is still vacant. Turn that man down. Tell him the position's been filled. You have no idea what my aunt has done for me. I owe it to her. A good job for her son is what's needed. Please, for my sake." George grudgingly texted Lana that he couldn't take her brother's job. Of course, the girl was upset. Resentment squeezed her heart. She even threw a plate on the floor in a fit of anger. They had forgotten her again. The next day, a new driver added fuel to the fire. A shiny young man came to apply for a job. He joyfully shared that the position informed him of his great-aunt from Moscow, the wife of the head of the Novosibirsk branch, George. So again, Valerie, not realizing it herself, ruined everything. Lana felt that she slowly began to hate this woman. Because of her, George repeatedly rejected her requests, and he himself was becoming more and more frustrated. George seemed to gradually burn out. Their lingering relationship looked more and more like a habit. Lana was very sad to realize this. After all, she still wanted to be near him, to hear his voice, to see his attentive gray eyes. Still, the girl realized more and more clearly that their affair was going nowhere. She had understood this from the beginning, but then passion overshadowed all reasonable thoughts. Lana felt exceptional and unique next to George. He seemed to be willing to do anything for her. George really did a lot for Lana, but lately his attention was clearly not enough for her. He was constantly dealing with family problems, working hard. Being in the background was so humiliating, especially when there were so many free men around who would have been happy to be with her. Come to my place for the weekend. I missed you very much for the weekend. I missed you very much. George did not appear in Novosibirsk for over a month. Baby, I cannot. At the head office, a lot of work. And maybe it's because of his wife again. George sighed. He must have loved Lana in his own way. He sure did. Why else couldn't he break up a relationship that had become too serious? He liked a lot of things about her. Her good looks, her determination, her wisdom. Despite her youth, Lana was remarkably adequate. She never threw tantrums at him, did not bring him to his caprice. George was sure that she would not get pregnant in order to marry him off and would not call Valerie with offers to leave her husband. But lately, Lana has been getting a little too jealous of his wife. Yes, indeed, there have been several incidents in which George has shown that family is more important to him than anything else. But he never hid that from Lana. He admitted on the first date that he wasn't single, and several times during the time they had been together. The man was ready to let her go when she tried to leave, but Lana always came back. George was genuinely happy about that. He was probably used to her presence around him by now. Beautiful, in love, not too demanding, understanding. It was a pity that her behavior was changing. But perhaps it is just some kind of crisis in the relationship. We have to be patient for a while, and things will go back to the way they were before. Lana sat with a glass of champagne in a filled fancy bathtub. Being a country girl from a poor family, she had never dreamed of such a life. A high-paying job, luxurious interiors, her own small business, a beautiful car, and a man she loved. True, things weren't so smooth with the man. He belonged to someone else, and lately this was becoming more and more pronounced. It was just that at one point everything went wrong, as if someone upstairs had decided that Lana had had enough personal happiness. George won't come again citing work, but it must be because of family. I wonder if she needs help. Will he leave his wife and child, the office, to support her? I'd have to find out. True, I'd have to lie. But it's a test. The future of their relationship depends on how George reacts. If he drops everything and comes to her, they'll be together. If not, Lana will pack her things and go to the country to her mother for a few months and quit her job. She will entrust the business to Eugenia for the time being. She's her right hand now. A friend knows everything. She can manage without her. And Lana will get sick and cry and come back free. But that's plan B. Still, the girl really hoped that Igor would rush to her as before. Maybe in time, he would even leave his wife, and they would build their own family. The cell phone clicked with a special beep, so George got a message from Lana. Valerie read it quickly. Okay, it all made sense. A new request. A mistress complaining to her husband about feeling terrible, vascular problems, and wild headaches. I don't have the strength for anything at all. Probably have to go to the hospital. I need help with my business and the personal support of a loved one. Valerie wondered. Her intuition told her that this was a lie. Sveta is a young girl in the prime of her life. The woman had seen her recent photographs, which she regularly sent to her husband. In them, Lana was strikingly fresh. Clean, glowing skin, a light blush, bright eyes. Looking at the pictures, Valerie thought that youth is beautiful in and of itself. The girl clearly did not look ill. Of course, anything can happen. She herself had been struck by hypertension all of a sudden. But even if Lana was really sick, let her treat herself. She wasn't a little girl. George took her to a high-paying job, helped her set up her business. So Madame clearly has the money for treatment. And let her demand care and attention from her close relatives. No, Valerie will not let her husband go to Novosibirsk in the near future. Except that she needs to think of a reason, but she can do it. Lately, Valerie felt just a generator of ideas. It didn't take long to think. When Valerie was taking her daughter from her training in figure skating, she noticed on the wall of the sports complex colorful poster, planned a grand performance pupil section at the big stadium. The show promised to be bright and colorful. Valerie approached the coach, Kate. Hello. And why my daughter doesn't take part in performance? Kate isn't ready yet. She has excellent prospects. Next year, the girl will show herself for sure. But now, probably, she needs additional lessons. I am willing to pay for them. If only my daughter would get to this concert. You see, we have relatives coming to visit us, the elderly. Maybe this is their last visit to Moscow. If they went to Kate's performance, it would make them happy. I understand everything, but our section needs new equipment. If you put Kate on the program, I'll get it for you. Well, all right. The coach agreed with obvious reluctance, but Kate will have a cameo role. She's still young. And it doesn't matter, glowed Valerie. At dinner, George said that the day after tomorrow he would fly to Novosibirsk to solve some work issues. Can't we reschedule the business trip? Valerie pretended to be surprised and upset by the news. Why? Something urgent again. I wanted to tell you the good news. Our Kate is going to perform at the Ice Palace. She's a contestant in the show, the smallest one of all. Can you believe it? Well, it's really something. George looked proudly at his daughter sitting nearby. You are very good. You're a star on the ice. Yes, Kate lowered her eyes modestly. I'm good. I tried so hard, and now I'm going to perform. You'll come and watch, won't you, Daddy? George looked confused into his daughter's hopeful eyes. The man's choice was obvious. Lana was about to receive another rejection. Another Valerie orchestrated situation to contribute to the destruction of the mistress-husband relationship. Lana was packing her things. She did not want to leave her apartment, which in 4 years had become almost home. But the girl firmly decided, this time she is definitely leaving George. He has shown her time and time again that family is more important to him. Lana will always be in second place for him, even perhaps in third place. After all, there is also the job she adores. She has already bought train tickets at the office. She herself has drawn up an order for her dismissal. The story is over. Lana realized she wanted to be the only one for her man. Perhaps it was time to start a family of her own. Eugenia recently married and is now expecting a son. Looking at the family happiness her friends of light realized that she dreams about the same. But a husband and a child, all this is unthinkable while she is in a relationship with George. It was time to end it. Lana no longer resented George for loving another woman. The man had done so much for her. The girl felt gratitude for him, and she would be sure to tell him to his face or on the phone. But later, not now. Right now, she needed to wait it out, get over it, hide for a while. And then a new life will begin. George watched Kate perform. He came to the Ice Palace with a tricked-out professional camera. Valerie watched as he tried to catch his daughter in the frame. He didn't succeed very often. Just as the coach had warned, Kate glimpsed in the back rows. But the proud father didn't seem to notice. His eyes burned with genuine admiration for his child. Beside him lay the bouquet of roses prepared for the little star. Just then, the same beeping sounded again on the cell phone that reported messages from Lena. George paid no attention to the sound. He was completely absorbed in his daughter's performance. And Valerie, of course, immediately read the text message and smiled victoriously. Lana asked not to look for her. She wrote that it was over between them. She even quit her job at George's branch to avoid seeing him. That seems like a victory, though of course it's too early to relax. George, returning to the empty Novosibirsk apartment, felt an acute sense of guilt. He had taken 4 years of Lena's life. She could have met her destiny in that time, married, had children, and not wasted her youth on a previously unpromising relationship. The only thing that comforted his conscience was that he had helped this girl to set up her business and become financially independent. Strange as it may seem, there was no sadness or regret that he and Lana were no longer together. On the contrary, the man even felt relieved. Now he would no longer have to rush between his wife and his mistress, trying to pay attention to both of them. There would be no more of this oppressive guilt over Lana and Valerie. The situation had resolved itself. Lucky. Valerie was celebrating her victory with her best friend Alien. The women were sitting at a pizza place near their office on their lunch break. "Well done," praised the woman. Alien. She overcame resentment, was able to forgive the man she loved, and kept the family together. She pulled it off so masterfully, and it was as if she had nothing to do with it. "Yes, it turns out I'm quite the strategist," Valerie agreed. "I think George appreciates family even more now. At the very least, he's trying very hard to make time for us. But George was already in a relationship. I don't want to scare you, but it will almost certainly happen again. He's basically capable of it. What are you going to do then?" "Well," Valerie put her glass on the table. There was a cold determination in her gaze. "Well, in that case, I already know exactly how to act.